So the New York Giants are at the Combine in Indianapolis. They're looking for prospects for pick number 5, for number 37. And I know they don't have a third-round choice, but things pick up again in the 4th round, and they need to hit big on this rookie draft class. We're here to talk about it next on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. Hi again, everybody. Paul Dottino back with you for another edition of the Big Blue Breakdown Live. We all know the Combine in Indianapolis has started earlier today. The linebackers, the defensive line, and the place kickers all came in to Indy. They have checked in. We will see coming up tomorrow, defensive backs and tight ends are next up on the list. Obviously, if you're the Giants, tight ends, probably not a big-time positional need. Defensive backs, though, yeah, I think there's enough of questions at corner where the Giants will be looking very, very carefully at their cornerbacks or the Combine's quarterbacks, I should say. And to be frank with you, defensive line and linebackers on the first day today, yeah, I hope the Giants were carefully looking, especially at the defensive line. Linebackers, I'm not quite as sure about, but I do think defensive line is something they needed to look very carefully at. All right, folks, so let's understand the parameters here. Number one, the draft comes after free agency. Now, why do I mention this? We talked about it on a previous program, but I want to make sure we've got these parameters down at the beginning of this program. We will then proceed to go and read your tweets. Hopefully you guys want to make a phone call or a video call. I'd be very glad to have you on the program. This is a fan participation program. Unlike many others, I do encourage fan participation. It is important to me, and I very much would like to have you guys be part of tonight's program. All right, so here's the deal. When you look at the NFL calendar, you have to keep in mind the following things. Number one, yes, the Combine is huge for all of the studying and the interviews, and not so much the drills, but the interviews and the personality profiles, the conversations that GMs have with each other, as well as agents, in trying to understand the full context of whatever it is that they may be trying to do. But here's what's important, okay? First of all, coming up on March 3rd, that is Tuesday, the time to tag a franchise or transition player expires. That's as of Tuesday. Now, we know Kyle Pitts from the Falcons. We know George Pickens from the Cowboys. There seems to be a lot of conversation at the Combine that Bryce Hall might be tagged Breece Hall might be tagged by the New York Jets. And he could be the third tag that we wind up seeing. But there will be no Giants tagged. I can't imagine in any universe that the Giants are going to tag any of their prospective free agents. But nonetheless, I mention that to you because, as we all know, the tag restricts an unrestricted free agent from having conversation. As long as they are exclusively franchised, it prohibits them from talking to anyone else. And the Giants will have to do some free agent shopping. Now, what do we know about the free agent situation with the Giants? Well, number one, we know they're in the middle of the pack in terms of how much money they have to spend. It's not a lot. It's not a little. It's in the middle of the pack. Yes, they can create a lot more space. Specifically, economically speaking, it would make sense to part ways with a Graham Gano, with a Devin Singletary. Those certainly would be two guys right off the top that you could lop off and save some salary cap funds. I am not of the opinion absolutely not of the opinion that the Giants should get rid of Bobby Okereke. And let me just address that point right now before we go anywhere else with any of the other topics of the night. Bobby Okereke is a $9 million player. He is a starting middle linebacker in this league who played really well the last month and a half of the season after Charlie Bullen replaced the defensive coordinator, Shane Bowen. Okereke is just about turning 30. There is no reason to believe that he is shot, done, over the hill, washed up. No, there is no reason to believe that whatsoever. He has been relatively healthy through his career. And the fact that he finished last season strong gives me a lot of hope that he will continue to perform like that in the 2023 season. Now, I'm going to give you a plethora of reasons why I would not cut Bobby Okereke. Number one, I do think he's got football left in him, as I said moments ago. And that's the most important thing. If you believe the guy can be an asset to your team moving forward and is a quality player, well, then you want him around. Number two, the Giants had a bunch of underachieving players on their defense last year. I think we all agree about that. And I'm sure that as you guys want to get in on the chat or on a phone call, again, the link is right here below at the bottom of your screen. I'm sure we would all agree that a bunch of guys on this defense underachieved. Okereke did for a great part of the season too. And then once the coordinator change was made, like magic, and I don't think it was a coincidence, he may have been, outside of Abdul Carter, the Giants' defensive player who ascended the most. Abdul Carter was number one, and I believe Bobby Okereke was number two. I thought those two guys played really good football under Charlie Bullen. And I think it's important to remember that when John Harbaugh took the job after being fired by the Baltimore Ravens, do you guys remember at all what Harbaugh said? And it may not have been at his initial press conference. It may have been in one of his other many interviews since then. But I certainly remember it. And it's something that I have always talked about, especially in light of so many people who say when you have a terrible record and you're out of it, that you should tank for a better draft pick. And I always say no, especially when you have a young team. You want them to learn how to win. You want them to learn, experience, and develop winning habits, because those individual things will help those individual players, which in turn can help your collective team the following year. It's not an automatic carryover, but individual players will benefit from forming winning habits and learning how important and how precious it is to win games. Well, here's what's interesting. John Harbaugh went out of his way in a recent interview, and again, I don't know if it was at the podium. I think it was more in a one-on-one that he had done in the last 2 weeks. He went out of his way to say one of the things that impressed him the most about the Giants, besides some of their young talent, their core players, and some of their premium position players, he was very impressed with how hard they played during the final month of the season. You see, John Harbaugh puts a premium on how you play out the string, as do I. Those of you who continue to say during losing seasons to tank, I'm sorry. I will not buy that frame of thought. Not if you pay me $1 million. I will not buy that frame of thought. John Harbaugh's not buying it either. And I strongly believe that he is going to base a lot of what he thinks about a number of players on this team based on what he saw from them during the final month of the season when they did not just play out the string, but they played hard and they played to win. He made it quite clear that that was a significant part of his evaluation and the attraction to come here. So I think those players' grades are going to partially be based on those particular games, because that tells you a lot about character and about professionalism. And by the way, doesn't that tell you a lot about if you really love football? Harbaugh's magic words: I want guys who are all about football, who totally love football all the time. Well, never is that more important than when you are supposedly playing out the string. So, folks, the Giants playing hard at the end of the regular season, beating the Raiders, beating the Cowboys. Yeah. Those victories just didn't impact their draft choice, which went down to 5. And those of you who are very angry about it, well, I'm sorry. But those 2 victories also impacted how John Harbaugh looked at this team and how he looks at those players and helps him figure out which of those players need to be a part of the 2026 season that he believes has playoff potential. I hope you guys finally understand that. Those of you who subscribe to tanking, I hope you finally understand the foolishness of the tanking philosophy. Now, I got that off my chest. Let's talk about free agency in particular, because as you know, even though this is the combine right now, and we'll talk about a whole bunch of stuff regarding draft picks and combine people, et cetera, in just a couple of minutes. But let's not forget, free agency has a dramatic impact on what you're going to do in the draft. Because while you always got that argument about best player available, positional value, and need, it now seems like it's a three-way conglomeration, right? The equation always used to be best player available or need. It used to be, let's combine those 2 things and see what we can get and come up with an answer. And then there were those who just believed in one or the other. Well, you know what's happened now in the last 5 or 6 years? You now have got this whole analytics community, which throws in positional value. Okay, so now you have 3 components if you want to be an NFL GM that you have to digest, kind of turn into a meatloaf, and spit something out. All right, so with that in mind, let's understand that on March 9th, as I look at my calendar, March 9th is a week from Monday. That's when the legal tampering period begins and agents can discuss the parameters for contracts with teams who want to sign their unrestricted free agents. That goes on for 2 days. And then, of course, on the 11th, the league's year or calendar, if you will, begins. And on the 11th, players can sign the dotted line. Okay? That also opens up the trading period, where you can now start making trades, which obviously also intersects with the draft. I'm just going over this calendar with you folks so that you have an understanding about where we're going here, because the draft is April 23rd, and it will give these teams an opportunity if they want to trade a player for a draft picks, they will have plenty of time to sort through those things. Okay. We got that out of the way. Now, let me go to the next topic of discussion that's been at the Combine. One of the scuttlebutt items that's been floating around an awful lot. And there is some free agent talk I want to get to in a moment. And obviously, we'll talk about the draft picks and the project, the prospects and the projects in just another moment. And I want to get to your chats too in just a moment as well. But Kayvon Thibodeaux has been one of the talking points and scuttlebutt around Indianapolis, because there is this narrative that, oh, the Giants have a high-level edge player who is in the final year of his contract because they're tied up to Brian Burns for a while and it's big money, and because they just got Abdul Carter last year as a rookie, that, you know what? They're not going to keep Kayvon Thibodeaux past the 2026 season. Okay, that may be true. That's not the reason you trade him. Let me explain. If you believe that Kayvon Thibodeaux is a good player, a quality player, what you do is you rely on his pride, because if you know anything about Kayvon Thibodeaux, you know he's got a tremendous amount of pride. He does prepare very, very hard. He does work at his craft. He's not afraid to do the dirty work. And he does have, a rather high opinion of himself. And he does strive to be as elite as he possibly can be. Now, it is true. His career with the Giants has been up and down. It is also true that some injuries have impacted his overall production. I won't disagree with any of that. But here's what I know about Kayvon Thibodeaux. He is very concerned with the perception and the image of what he is as a football player. He's going into the final year of his deal because it was the fifth-year option that the Giants picked up at about $14 million. Well, $14 million for a quality edge player is actually a very reasonable number. Cap-wise, it's not a crippler. Okay? It's not. It's a very reasonable number. If you're the Giants, you can play this a number of ways. Okay, number one, you could certainly deal him. Now, Joe Schoen at the Combine came right out and said, right now, Kayvon Thibodeaux is a member of our team. And we'll take phone calls on anybody. But he's a good player. We're happy to have him. And they're not looking to shop him. But they'll take calls. And that's what they should do. Okay? The Giants should always be willing to pick up the phone, because that's due diligence. You learn something when you pick up the phone. You learn about the marketplace. You learn about what people are looking for, what the prices are, et cetera, et cetera. You should always pick up the phone if you're a general manager. That's just being due diligence. It's being rational. It's being responsible. So I agree with exactly how Joe Schoen is handling this. Thibodeaux is not a guy he wants to move, but he'll take phone calls. He's willing to listen if somebody calls for him. And he said teams called for Thibodeaux at the trade deadline last year. And the Giants decided not to move him. Okay, so that's the first option, is you move him. And what are you going to get for him? Well, a guy has been up and down. He has had injury concerns. And I don't necessarily know that on the trade market you're going to get true value for him. I think Kayvon Thibodeaux is worth more to the Giants than he is a team on the open market right now, because they're not going to want to pay you very much for two reasons. Actually, three. Number one, they'll have to re-sign him to a big contract because he's not going to want to take a cheap pick, a cheap deal. Number two, he has had some injuries, which, of course, durability is another problem when you talk about value of a player on the open market, right? Okay? And then number three, and this is to be bantered about as much as you like, his production has not been dominant. Where he was picked, you expect all-pro caliber production. He's had one star season when he had double-digit sacks. So even though he's a good player and a solid edge player, he is not a consistent star. He's had one star season. So for all those reasons, you would not expect to get a lot on the open market for Thibodeaux. Okay, so if you're going to get undervalued return, why deal him? All right, that's number one. Number two, and this is where I go. You look at Kayvon Thibodeaux and you say, look, the guy's a good, solid edge rusher. His $14 million is very reasonable. And oh, by the way, he's in a contract year. And as we all know, there are a lot of players in this league and every other professional sports league who play their butts off in their contract season as if their butt is on fire. That's what a lot of players do because they have big eyes and they can sniff free agency and they will do everything they can, understanding that there's one chance to elevate their value going into an open market, and that is their contract season. Kayvon Thibodeaux does care about the perception of his play. And he has a tremendous amount of pride. I know. I'm with him, around him every day during the season. There's no question. He is going to give 250% this year to enhance his name and his value as much as possible. If you know anything about Kayvon Thibodeaux, that's what you know. Trust me, the Giants front office knows this too. Now, does John Harbaugh? I don't know the answer to that. But I do know that Joe Schoen and the Giants front office, they're very much aware of what Kayvon Thibodeaux's makeup is. And he is going to target a blockbuster season to enhance his value. So if you're the Giants, what do? Well, you keep him on the roster. You get him to play like his butt is on fire. He goes out and has a double-digit sack season and just basically kicks people's tails all over the field, combines with Burns and Abdul Carter, and they wreck other teams' offenses. That's what you do. You make use, just as he's trying to make use of this last year to enhance his position, will you make use of his attitude and his production to enhance your team's position? And at the end of the year, when you look at your salary cap, and if you say, you know what, he had a career year, he's going to want big money, and he goes upstairs and says, fellas, pay me, show me the money. I just had a career year. Just like Wan'Dale Robinson just had a career year in 2025 in his contract season. Cordell Flott had a career year in his contract season. Jermaine Illuminor had a career year in his contract season. All three of those guys are looking to get paid. Well, Thibodeaux has a big year. He says, I want to get paid. And now if you're the Giants, if you decide not to pay him, and I understand the economics, it would be extremely hard to give him a big-time contract knowing that you have Abdul Carter and Brian Burns already in that edge rusher's room. So what do? Well, if he goes somewhere as a free agent off of a career year, he will sign a very sweet deal. And folks, what do we know about free agency and sweet deals? We know that chances are pretty decent that you will get a third-round draft choice back as a compensatory pick. So, best case scenario, Thibodeaux stays, plays like his butt's on fire, helps the Giants' defense become terrific again, and then you get a third-round draft choice for him if he leaves as a free agent. That's a win-win for the Giants. I don't understand why there are those people out there who are so anxious to trade Kayvon Thibodeaux and don't understand that a win-win is better than trading him today when he is going to be undervalued in this market. It's really not a very hard concept to figure out. Now, the other item that I think is very important to remember is that he was hurt, because I know there are going to be skeptics out there, right? There are going to be people out there saying, well, you're banking on him having so much pride, being a workaholic, being a guy who cares about perception, and being a guy who's going to have a big-time performance in his contract season. You want to be a skeptic, right? You want to tell me I'm crazy. Fine. I don't care. I know what I know because I'm around the guy all the time. I'm a pretty good judge of character. But here's what I'll tell you. Just remember one thing about Kayvon Thibodeaux. He missed the whole latter part of the season last year, and that's when Charlie Bullen took over as defensive coordinator. And by the way, the entire defense played better under Charlie Bullen. Specifically, we saw the surge in Abdul Carter. We saw the resurgence of Bobby Okereke. Okay? We saw Dane Belton play better. And because Thibodeaux was hurt, we didn't get a chance to see him under Charlie Bullen. What we did see was somewhat lackluster play, like most of the Giants' defenders were guilty of under Shane Bowen. So if you're going to accept the premise that the change in defensive coordinators did elevate the play of the Giants' defense, okay, if you're going to accept that premise, and I don't see how you can't, because it wasn't a coincidence. If you're going to accept that, then you also have to be prepared to accept the possibility that had Thibodeaux been available to play under Charlie Bullen, that he would have looked more like the player the Giants wanted. Anyway, I'm done with the Kayvon Thibodeaux conversation. I think it's one-sided. I think you keep him unless you get absolutely bowled over with a Godfather offer. And you guys know I'm a paisan. A Godfather offer means an offer that you can't refuse. Well, I don't think they're going to get an offer they can't refuse. He's going to be undervalued on the trade market. It's just that simple. So it makes no sense to trade him unless you get a really sweet deal. And you know what? Maybe Joe Schoen can swing a really sweet deal. Maybe somebody calls him and says, you know what? I need Kayvon Thibodeaux, and slams their fist on the table, screaming into the phone, I need Kayvon Thibodeaux. Let's make a trade, Joe. Well, if Joe can hold them up, maybe you do make a deal. But short of holding him up, why? Why would you make that trade? All right. Enough on the Kayvon Thibodeaux situation. A lot of scuttlebutt about the free agents that the Giants have. And I'm already a half hour into the program. I can't believe I'm still on this, but the three biggest name free agents that the Giants have, Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle, Wan'Dale Robinson at wide receiver, Cordell Flott at corner. I mentioned a few minutes ago, all three had career years, and all three are going to be looking for raises off of the deals that just expired or will going to expire, in another week. That's a fact. John Harbaugh said at the combine, John Harbaugh said this week he would like to keep all three players. He was specifically asked about those three. That says nothing of Dane Belton or of Daniel Bellinger or Nacho Nunez-Roches, other free agents. He wasn't asked about those guys. He was asked about the Giants' top three unrestricted free agents. And he said flat out, I've looked at the tape. I've seen the film. I would like to keep all three players. But he also said, I understand that may not be possible. Well, that's where the salary cap comes in. And it's quite clear from the scuttlebutt at the combine in Indianapolis that there's not a lot of hope for the Giants to keep all three. That sounds virtually impossible. Wan'Dale Robinson picked a great time to have a career year, over 90 catches and over 1,000 yards. In my mind, he's got to be easily one of the top 5 free agent wide receivers available on the market. He's going to get a big chunk of change, and I just don't think the Giants are going to be able to chase him to the bank. Now, the good news here is that this draft is stocked with boundary and with slot wide receivers. So they could replenish. They could get a receiver on a rookie contract who might be able to come in and give the Giants some really nice production in the passing game. Now, what about Illuminor? Well, that's another guy who, in all honesty, is a good player. He's a good player. He's a solid player. Now, the right tackles on the free agent market, don't even bother looking for the list because it's ugly. He's going to get strong offers because it's not a great tackle draft. It's a better guard draft than it is a tackle draft. So if you're a team out there that needs a right tackle and you realize that the draft may not be the place to get it, you're probably going to try to get into a bidding war for Jermaine Illuminor. And that's something that I don't know the Giants are going to be able to do. Now, on the flip side of that argument, one could say maybe the Giants don't even have to get into a bidding war for him because they do have Marcus Bain, last year's 5th-round pick out of Purdue, who showed some really nice flashes in very limited action. Perhaps, and I don't know how much work the Ravens people did on Marcus Bain when he came into the draft last year, but perhaps the Giants' new coaching staff, maybe they understand that, Marcus Bowe is a guy that we think should be challenging for a starting job this summer anyway. And so maybe they're willing to take that plunge, which of course would then make them much less willing to fork over a higher price for Illuminor. Risky? Sure it is. Especially when you've got a second-year quarterback like Jackson Dart who is going to need protection. But is that a potential road that the Giants want to go down? Sure it is. And I'm telling you, with the dearth of free agent right tackles available and the somewhat slight availability of right tackles in this draft, all it takes is one other team out there to want to give Jermaine Illuminor a boatload of money. It's my understanding from the scuttlebutt at the Combine that most people do believe Illuminor will get a number that will draw him away from the Giants. So as I've said on this program, as well as Big Blue Kickoff Live, I'm really not looking for Robinson or Illuminor to make it back. I just think they're going to get sweeter deals elsewhere. Flott, I just don't know. The one thing about Flott, and remember, Wan'Dale Robinson has had some injury history too, and that could somewhat limit his price on the open market. But coming off the career year like he did with 90-plus catches and 1,000-plus yards and showing that he could be a boundary receiver, I don't know how much the injuries will diminish his price tag. Now, Flott's another story. Flott has been banged up every year he's been with the Giants. He has had to lose some games to injury. He also had a career year. He proved to everybody that he is a quality corner in this league. I think he's a corner 2. I don't think he's a corner 1, but he's a corner 2. I'm absolutely sure that when Harbaugh says he wants to keep those 3 guys, he does. I'm sure he does. But again, are we talking about a bidding war for Cordell Flott? I don't know. There are apparently a lot of pretty good corner prospects in this draft after you get out of the first round. There are some in the second and third round that could potentially be solid corners in this league. The Giants don't have a third-round pick. So if they think they're going to get a corner in the draft, to get one of any ilk, well, if you don't take one at 5, and I don't think they will, they probably have to take one at 37 in the top of the second round because they don't have a third-round pick. So how do you calculate that into your equation as to how much you would want to bid to try to retain Cordell Flott? And I do think that potentially they could be outbid for him too. So, in terms of the 3 marquee free agents for the Giants, that's the scuttlebutt that's coming out of the Combine. I'm not surprised by any of it because if you've listened to this program or the Big Blue Kickoff Live program, these are things that I've tried to explain to you now for several weeks. None of what's coming out of the Combine is surprising me. The general consensus and the general feel about the Giants as a team, some of their question marks in free agency, some of their potential needs, it's all very much meshing with what we've told you guys now for several weeks. None of this stuff is a surprise. There doesn't seem to be anything coming out of left field or any left hooks, coming from the blind side. No, nothing. It's all pretty much very self-evident for anybody who's been following along since the season ended. All right, before we go anywhere else, there have been a slew of people in the chat room, and since this program is about you guys, I do think it's important we go there. So let me get over to the chat room. And again, if you want to call me, phone call or audio, video call, again, you can go to the code up in the upper corner of the screen, or you can go to the link down at the bottom. So let's see what we got here. We got here Aiden Fink, Paul, everyone watching. Paul, you still going to try and make another flight to Indy? Combine Street coming to an end. No. I have been in touch through phone calls and emails and texts with as many people in Indy as I possibly can be. Have done a bunch of video calls, as you know, on Big Blue Kickoff Live during the day. So we're still getting a good flavor for what's happening out there. But no, not going to be making the personal appearance this year. Got 3 different flights canceled over a 2-day period. And at that point, you just got to punt, okay? When it's 4th and 25, you punt. Oscar the Grouch, 755, says, trade Jameis Winston to the New York Jets, please. That's not going to happen, by the way. He's only a $4 million salary cap hit next year. That is not a lot of money. The Giants are happy with him in the locker room, and they're happy with the talent that he brings at a very reasonable price tag. Armand Duda says, Jameis is right where he belongs. His contract is cheap, too. No reason to trade him. Won't help the cap. Aiden says, we need our hype man. He brings great veteran leadership. Look, there's no question. Tommy DeVito was very close with Jackson Dart over the course of the offseason last year. And then he wound up going to the Patriots, obviously, when he signed to be on the 53. Well, Russell Wilson was a big brother to Jackson Dart, and so was Jameis Winston. Wilson won't be coming back. He's a free agent. He's going elsewhere. So it is important for Jameis Winston to be one of the 3 big brothers remaining to help Jackson Dart through the next stage of his career. And Armand Duda gets it. Exactly. He's a great mentor for Dart. I didn't even have to read that. I already tried to tell you. And Imam Perry says that's an understatement. And he says, salute. And I say back to you. Aiden Fink says, how aggressive do you think the Giants will be in free agency? I don't think they will. Their most aggressive move might be trying to bring back one of those 3 higher-priced tickets. Isaac Moore, 1248, says, hey, Paul and Giants family, good to see you. Hope everybody, by the way, was able to get out from under the snow without suffering any kind of pulled muscles or injuries. My goodness. North Jersey, 28 inches. It was brutal. And then 2 more inches this morning. Oh, my goodness. All right. Armand Duda says, as much as they can with the cap space, they will fill what position they can, and they don't feel confident they can with the draft. Yeah, look, I'll give you a great example, right? One great, really former NFL executive I know, he's been around a long time, and he said to me, he goes, listen, just talked to him today. He said, if I'm the Giants, what I do is I try to get some experienced, proven, reasonably priced veterans on offense who can immediately step in and work with Jackson Dart. I don't need a couple of young guys who are still trying to feel their way and trying to learn while Jackson Dart is entering his 2nd season and wants to take the next step in his career. He said, so what I would do if I were the GM, I would add a couple of pieces on offense, reasonably priced veteran free agents, because you don't have to kind of mold them along. And this way they can also help Dart. You surround Dart with guys who have done it before. And then on defense, that's where I would concentrate the draft. try to get young, quality, inexpensive talent to help fill in on the defense. And that makes a lot of sense to me. I like it. I think it's a good, sound strategy. And that's why, as we are now in the middle of the combine, I am moving off of Carnell Tate as the guy I was really hoping for the Giants to grab with the 5th overall pick in the draft. Okay? I'm moving off that. I've been a Carnell Tate guy for about a month or so. My initial preliminary feeling was go get him, match him with Neighbors, give Dart a guy who can make contested catches, who has glue for hands, who runs great routes, and can really help the Giants be a dynamic attack. And he certainly, has played in big games. The pressure won't be too much for him. Tate very easily could be a top 5 pick in this draft. But I'm going to tell you something, Armand. I'm thinking maybe get a receiver later on. Daniel Jeremiah from NFL Network says there are 19 receivers in the first 3 rounds of this draft. So you can get a receiver. If you want to get a young, inexpensive receiver, you can get one who is of some quality in this draft. If you want to go at 37, you could. Maybe you make a deal, move down at 37 if you want to try to add a 3rd rounder. Or maybe you try to package a 4 and a 5 and get into the bottom of the 3rd round. Who knows? Or maybe maybe there is a player. I don't know if there's a player that you may want to make a deal with, and it's not Kayvon Thibodeaux. But I do think that maybe the Giants should go the route of signing a respectable veteran free agent receiver and potentially drafting a prospect, not a prospect, a project receiver, as opposed to taking a receiver in the 1st round. I think I'm all about right now best player available at number 5. That's it. Just best player available. I don't give a horse's butt, okay? I don't, about positional value. Best player available. The Giants cannot miss at 5. They've got to get a guy who can make an immediate impact on this team, okay, and be part of the future for years to come. And John Harbaugh has been very clear in his statements in Indianapolis and even prior to that about they've got to get a legit player there. He didn't come out and just say BPA, best player available, but he has said you've got to get high-quality player there. And so it doesn't sound to me like positional value is going to be part of the equation for the Giants. I do think they will just take the best guy on the board at 5. We can talk a little bit more about that later on in the program if you like. Isaac Moore, 1248. I want them to go after Romeo Doubs if we can't afford Wan'Dale Robinson. Isaac, I have mentioned that on the Big Blue Kickoff Live show before. I don't know if I've mentioned it on this program, but I think that Wan'Dale Robinson will cost more than Romeo Doubs. And Doubs is exactly the type of receiver that I would be talking about or targeting if I were the Giants. I happen to agree with you. I think that makes a lot of sense for me if I'm the GM. Now, I've had pushback. People get on Twitter when I said that on BBKL and say, whoa, no, Doubs is going to cost more than Wan'Dale Robinson. Are you sure? I'm not. I think Doubs will come in cheaper. And quite honestly, he would interest me. Iman Perry says, facts, Paul, tanking doesn't work. I'm so glad that I don't have to convince you, Iman, that's for sure. He mentions the Harbaugh phrase, love football. Isaac Moore, 1248, says 5 is still good with me. See, that's the other thing about this, Isaac. The Giants are picking at 5, and they're absolutely in position to get a terrific player, regardless of position, right? Well, here's what we know. If you strictly look at skills, tool set, best player available, who are the possibilities at 5? Well, we know Mendoza is going 1 to the Raiders. Okay, so scratch that off. He's going to be the number 1 pick anyway. So that means you need to find 4 players, player 2, 3, 4, and 5, who you could honestly say, if they're the best player available on the board, we've got no problem running up the card. All right. So, who is likely to be in that bunch? I don't think there's any question from the scuttlebutt at the combine, had multiple conversations. Arvell Reese is going to be in that group. David Bailey as the premier edge rusher of this draft is going to be in that group. And I don't know that anybody is going to argue that those 2 guys will be amongst the top 5. I think they're unanimous top 5 selections. Okay? How do you feel about the top 2 offensive linemen? Well, the scuttlebutt's really clear. They might be. Mawanoa and Fano. They might be worth top 10 picks. But the only reason you would pick either one of those guys in the top 5 is for desperate need or positional value. Oh, tackle. Got to have a tackle. Too valuable. Got to push him up. But see, that's artificially pushing a guy up to 5. When it's been made pretty clear to me by those who I have communicated with that those 2 guys might be top 10 picks, but they're not. Neither one really belongs in the top 5. So let's push the 2 tackles aside. When I talked about a month ago on Big Blue Kickoff Live, maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I had said, I expect somebody is going to push one of those tackles into the top 5 because they're going to go with that positional value stuff, and they're going to go with the fact that they're desperate for one. So somebody might push a tackle into the top 5, but neither one deserves to be there. All right. If they want to do that, fine. Let them push one of those tackles into the top 4 picks. All the more better for the Giants, because that means there'll be another player, quality player out of the top 5 that drops to the Giants at 5. Jeremiah Love, by practically everyone I've spoken to and communicated with, is a top 5 talent in this draft. Now, could the Giants possibly take him? I don't see that. Talent-wise, he's absolutely worth the 5th pick if he's there. But we know they've already got 2 young running backs, developing running backs. They complement each other very well. I don't see it. But if they did take him, it would strictly be based on toolbox. Toolbox, skill set. Jeremiah Love is a top 5 football player in this draft. And that would be the reason you take him. You would be ignoring the other 2 facets. Who else? Well, I do think Cornell Tate is one of the top 5 players, potentially, in this draft. Again, it depends on what your grading system is. And Caleb Downs, obviously. So let's just say we're pretty sure that number one, Mendoza. We're pretty sure that Bailey and Reese are going to be gone in the top 4. So that means there'll be one other player going before the Giants do at 5. Could it be Carnell Tate? Sure. Could it be Jeremiah Love? I don't think it'll happen, but he certainly has the talent and the value to be there. But again, this whole running back thing. Could it be one of the tackles gets artificially pushed up? Yeah. Then you've got another player from Ohio State. And folks, I'm getting a lot of great feedback on him. Inside linebacker Sonny Styles. Getting a lot of great feedback on him. One veteran analyst told me today he may be the best player in the draft, period. That if you threw away the arguments about need and positional value, Sonny Styles should be the number 1 player on everybody's grading board. That's how much he thinks of Sonny Styles. And it's not just the tape. It's not just the fact that he played in a big-time conference with a big-time program and didn't wilt under pressure. It's not about the fact that he played a ton of games because he's got great experience, but it's also because of his demeanor. It's because of his intelligence. He brings it all to the table. He may be the most complete, most talented player in this draft, according to this one veteran NFL observer. So he said, yeah, absolutely, I could pick Sonny Styles at number 5. So, what are we talking about? Let me recap this for you folks. Let me make sure we understand this. This is from the scuttlebutt that's going on at the Combine. So, you've got the quarterback, Mendoza. Bailey's going to be gone. Reese is going to be gone. So that's 3. And then we've got these other ones that we've talked about. Now, let's just move Love and the 2 tackles out of the way for just a minute. One of the top 4 teams is probably going to see Carnell Tate as being a correct value in the top 5. Another player who they could easily see would be Downs. And another player they could easily see being there is Styles. More and more people, they loved him at the podium today. Styles dominated the podium today with his demeanor, his character, the way just that he conducted himself. This is a guy who wears the green dot for Ohio State. He's in charge of that defense. Very impressive guy. So if I said to you at 5, the Giants will have the opportunity to get one of the following 3 players: Styles, Downs, or Tate. Let me just say this. Forget about how you rank them 1, 2, or 3. If they get any one of those 3, are you excited? You should be. You should be. Because those are 3 very high quality players. And the way the Combine scuttlebutt is coming back right now, Tate, Downs, or Styles will probably be there for the Giants at 5. Because I honestly don't think anyone in the top 4 is going to pass on Reese, Bailey, and we know the Raiders are not passing on Mendoza. Now, if Love sneaks up there, or if one of the tackles sneak up there, then guess what? All 3 of those guys could be available at 5 for the Giants. Not just 2 of them, not just 1 of them. All 3 guys could be there. And to my way of thinking, you should be throwing a pizza party for any of those 3. It doesn't matter what your preference is. Any one of those 3 guys are going to be impactful on this New York Giants roster. Now that's the scoop. That's what's coming out of the combine right now. As you put all the tea leaves together and you connect all the dots. That's what it's looking at. Now, how do you make that final decision? Well, again, the Giants have to go through free agency. You hear me talk about this all the time. You do have to let that play itself out. If the Giants can't get another wide receiver in free agency, Robinson leaves, and they can't sign anybody who was worth anything, does that change how you might feel about the equation for Carnell Tate? Maybe it does. If you decide that you're going to go for Styles, well, guess what? There's a pro and negative there. The pro is if he's really that good, he's going to set you up for a long time. But there is a counter to that, because as it stands now, you think you've got Bobby Okereke at a reasonable $9 million price tag, and you think you're going to be able to bring Micah McFadden back on a 1-year prove-it contract off of a broken foot. So he's going to be very inexpensive, incentive-laden, was coming off a career season a year ago where he had over 100 tackles. You know, would you rather, again, this is where that whole equation comes in, the need part of the equation. Do you feel that you got to get more help for your quarterback right away, or do you feel you've got to get more help for your defense right away? Now, again, go back to the other thing that I was told by the veteran NFL guy. Go for reasonable free agents on offense, draft the young talent on defense. So maybe you do draft the Styles. Or maybe it turns out that Downs actually does fall to you at 5. Remember, the odds are there's going to be 2 or 3 of those guys at 5. We already know that. The mathematics work out. Now, if Downs is there, why would you draft Caleb Downs? Well, we got a few reasons why. There are a lot of people who think he is one of the top 2 players in this draft when you go by best player available. Strictly by that, he's one of the top 2 players in this draft by a lot of people's evaluations. So you can't go wrong if you're taking one of the top 2 players at 5. We know that Denard Wilson, according to John Harbaugh this week at the Combine, one of the things he loves about Denard Wilson is that he said Wilson adopted many characteristics from our Baltimore Ravens defense as a defensive coordinator. He does an awful lot of what we love to do in Baltimore. Well, what did John Harbaugh love about his Baltimore Ravens defense? He loved having an impactful safety. Most recently, Kyle Hamilton, who, by the way, yes, Hamilton's a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger physical hitter than Downs is, but in every other way, Caleb Downs gets compared to Kyle Hamilton. Hamilton is what's known as a rock and roll safety, which means he can do anything. He can play free. He can play strong. He can play in the box. He can play left. He can play right. You can make him a wild card pseudo linebacker if you prefer. Even throw him on the slot on occasion if you like. He is a rock and roll safety. Now, what else do we know that would make that a very good pick? Well, Denard Wilson, as you have heard on this program, when I talked to Dave McGinnis, the Titans radio analyst and former NFL head coach, McGinnis told me that Denard Wilson absolutely prefers playing the 3 safety package. Could not do it a lot in Tennessee because they didn't have 3 safeties capable of running the scheme. But he wants to do it because he doesn't want to have to substitute all the time. He wants to be able to keep those same guys in the back of the defense and use those guys to maneuver, confuse offenses, change around their responsibilities, and keep the same guys on the field. Well, guess what? That's exactly what Caleb Downs does. He fits the Wilson scheme like a glove. And he fits John Harbaugh's desire for a superstar safety. And if you heard John Harbaugh's interview with Mike Francesa about a week or so ago, and Francesa mentioned Downs to him, Harbaugh's eyes lit up, his face lit up, he smiled and talked about how much he would love Caleb Downs. So, despite the fact that positional value people will tell you, you can't take a safety at number 5. It's only been done twice in NFL draft history. Well, I got a hunch the Giants would throw that part of the equation out the door. And if they're going to play a lot of 3 safety looks, well, then guess what? It would appear to me, and I think probably everybody else out there watching this program right now, that Caleb Downs presents a lot more promise than even Dane Belton did this year. And Belton did very well. He had a nice year, and he is an unrestricted free agent. But if I said to you, you could replace Dane Belton with Caleb Downs, I don't know very many of you out there who would decline that opportunity. Caleb Downs is a smart, instinctive, versatile football player who bleeds football all the time and loves football all the time. Does that sound like he matches somebody's criteria? Yeah, I've moved off Carnell Tate at 5, and I think if I had my druthers as a GM with a team in the Giants position, Caleb Downs would be my preferred pick at 5. I have, we have gotten closer, we've gotten to the combine now. I still reserve the right to change my mind by the time we get to the draft. But I'm thinking right about now. And remember, one of John Harbaugh's other comments at the combine in the last 2 days, he said flat out, and he understands this, he said, we must stop the run. That's not negotiable. He understands that. It's been bad the last 2 years. But you know what? Caleb Downs can be a part of stuffing the run. He is that kind of player. So as I sit here now during the combine, and I always do during the combine, I always do decide on who, if I had my druthers, my guy would be if I were sitting in the Giants GM chair. And I have, at this point, I've decided that Caleb Downs would be the guy who I would like to see the Giants get more than any other. I don't know if he gets to 5. Again, I think it is clear in terms of best player available, he is one of the top 5 talents in this draft. So he may not get to 5. Queensboro Brother says, salutations to you, Paul, my friend, and greetings to the live chat on this Hump Day Wednesday. A good day to talk Giants football. It's always a great day to talk Giants football. Isaac Moore, 1248, says, Harbaugh is thrilled to pick at number 5. Never had a pick that high. Armand Duda says, tanking is a sickness. It's essentially just a way to make a losing season feel like a win. Never thought of it that way, Armand, but I like your style. Mark B, 8365, another one of our loyalists. Good evening, family. Jameis stays. Absolutely. Good for Dart and the team. Let him fulfill his 2-year contract, for sure. He also says, Kayvon is a keeper. I'm glad I didn't have to sell you on that one. Armand Duda says, you'd think we'd have learned the importance of depth on the roster, especially for defense by now. Corey Allen, 8965. I think he's a new member to the program, and welcome. He says 5th pick. I'm not sure exactly what that refers to. Let's see, what do we have here? Isaac Moore, 1248, says, I'm not paying Kayvon next year. Well, that's okay. I already told you. You don't have to pay him next year to get the most out of him this year. Corey Allen, 8965, says, 5th pick, Buckeye Sonny Styles. What do you think? I think he'd have to be under consideration. That's what I think. Eric Garrison, 3569, says, Panthers will take him. You know, one of the other guys I talked to today said, this is what's called, and I never heard this before, but I like the way he said it. He said to me, this is a flavors draft. And I was thinking, I was like, that's not a bad nickname for it. It's a flavors draft because it seems pretty clear that there's going to be a wide variety of opinions as to who the top 5 best players are in this draft in terms of how you rank them. I think we know it's pretty obvious from talking to the folks, the scuttlebutt around the combine. We kind of know, as I said, whatever you think of Mendoza, he's the first pick, right? The Raiders have to take him. They have no choice. But it is pretty clear that there's that next handful of guys, right? And whatever order you want to put them in, we kind of know who that next handful is. It is going to be Bailey. It is going to be Downs. It is going to be Reese. It is going to be Tate. It is going to be Love. It is going to be Styles. Those guys are in the next handful. How you want to rank them depends on what flavor you want. But those in all likelihood are the next best players in this draft. So between Vegas, then the Jets, then the Cardinals, and then the Titans, those are your 4 teams that are going to have to make picks before the Giants come up on the clock at 5. And that second handful, right? That second handful, they're going to have more than one of that second handful available to them at 5. That's why they're in such a good spot. That's why it was not something to be upset about when they won their last 2 games last season and finished with the 4 wins and fell down to the 5th spot in the draft. Whoop-de-darn-do, big deal. They're going to get a terrific player at 5, folks. I just wish that people had understood that when they started to talk about, I don't want the team to win. I want to get a higher draft pick. You're picking 5th. And there's going to be more than one really good player sitting there. Isaac Moore, 1248. Trade him or not. He's not getting another contract. He's talking about Kayvon, obviously. Isaac Moore also comes back and says, I'll take any one of the top 3 from Ohio State. It's not even top 3. It's not. Downs, Reese, Styles, and Tate. The Ohio State Buckeyes easily have 4 players who are top 6 or 7 on anybody's best player available board. I mean, think about it. There's 4 of them. If you love Ohio State and you're like, I'm taking an Ohio State player no matter what, Mendoza goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 1, 2, 3, 4 players. If you are desperate to grab any one of those 4 Buckeyes, guess what? You're in. You're going to get one of those 4 Buckeyes if you want one. JDJ, if I'm Joe Schoen, I'd keep Kayvon Thibodeaux, let him show he can stay healthy and be more productive under Denard Wilson, and then revisit trade talks during the trade deadline where teams might be more desperate. And that's a possibility as well. That is another avenue you could explore. However, if Thibodeaux's playing great and the Giants are really solidly in the mix at the trade deadline, are you going to be that eager to trade him? Probably not. Armand Duda, people always think that a player they don't think is worth keeping will somehow seem worth a lot on the trade market. How true is that? If he isn't worth it to you, why would other teams think he is so valuable? Armand, you make so much sense, and yet so many people will refuse to listen to you. Isaac Moore says, I don't think Kayvon is motivated by money, just my opinion. I think it's more pride than anything else. He does yearn for respect and recognition for what he believes is top-level talent. And I don't think he's totally out of whack with that. But the production, for whatever reason, whether it's been injuries or poor defensive coordination, he has not consistently been the top-level talent that he was projected to be at this point. Mark B, 83-65, looking forward to seeing 5 eat up this coming season. That's Kayvon Thibodeaux. And again, if you were with us earlier, Mark, you know that's exactly how I feel. Isaac Moore says, since Sauce Gardner was not playing well, he got traded to the Colts for 2 first-round picks and A.D. Mitchell. Sorry, Armand, you don't know what other teams are thinking. Yeah, but here's the problem, Isaac, and here's where you're misguided. Everybody and their mother, for years, from the time Sauce Gardner came out in the draft, he was thought of as blue chip premium, shutdown corner, great player. Started out his career with the Jets playing really, really, really well. And was consistently really, really good until this past season. So there was a stronger, higher level body of work that Gardner has put on the field as compared to what Kayvon Thibodeaux has. So yes, there would be a team more likely and more eager to pay a higher price to get a Sauce Gardner. His level of production was more consistent and at a higher level. So Armand, don't worry. I don't have to defend you on that one, but the facts are self-evident. Let it go. Armand does happen to say Tibbs' performance went down while Bowen was DC. Could be he improves under a new coordinator. We had that discussion earlier. Let's see here. Isaac Moore says, Wandale making more money because neighbors got hurt. And again, the Giants, did you see? I did post on my Twitter page earlier. There was apparently an Instagram photo of Malik Neighbors working out doing quite a bit of agility drills. Joe Schoen at the Combine says that both Cam Scuttlebutt and Malik Neighbors are progressing on schedule. And at this point, it's looking good for them to be ready for the season. But again, he cautions, you never can tell. I don't want to be trapped by my words. So they're still taking it one day at a time. But the Giants are obviously hopeful and optimistic that both of those players are going to continue their upward trend in their rehab. So that would be terrific. But yes, Wan'Dale Robinson did benefit from a lot more targets and therefore catches and yardage because Neighbors was out of the lineup for the bulk of the season. I don't disagree with that either. But Isaac, here's what you're missing. Number one, he did prove his durability this year. All right, he took a lot of big-time hits and still had a terrific season. And number two, he also proved that he could play more on the boundary. When it was thought of that he was just a slot receiver, he proved that he could win his routes as a boundary receiver in the NFL. He absolutely enhanced his value, not just to the Giants, but to everyone else around the league. Iman Perry says, let him go to Tennessee with Dable. I guess he's talking about Wan'Dale Robinson. And yeah, I could understand, Dable telling the Titans, hey, we got Cam Ward at quarterback. I know what Wan'Dale Robinson did for Jackson Dart. Bring him down here. Let him help Cam out. I could absolutely see that. Mark B says, hoping the Giants figure out a way to keep both Illuminor and Wan'Dale Robinson. Anything is possible. Armand Duda says, we aren't winning any bidding wars. Mark B says, continuity on the O-line is paramount. Iman Perry says, every 1,000 yards isn't created equal. Obviously, he's talking about Robinson. Isaac Moore does come back with an item that I agree with. He thinks Dobbs is cheaper and better in his opinion. Well, again, better is a very relative term. I think Dobbs might come in a little bit cheaper than Wan'Dale Robinson. And that's why I've mentioned he would certainly be someone of interest if I were a GM. Oh, let's see here. What else do we have? Iman Perry says Omar Cooper in the second round. I understand. He mentions DJ Moore as well. There are going to be options, okay? There will be options. It's not like there's no place to turn if the Giants wind up losing any of those three key free agents, so to speak. Armand Duda says, let's not forget to make sure we avoid another season without a reliable kicker to be available. Well, Ben Sauls, I think the Giants really liked him. Now, the question is, what does the new coaching staff think about him? That we don't know. If Michael Gabriel had remained the special teams coordinator, I think Sauls would have absolutely been back in training camp and been fighting for a job. I don't know what the new coaching staff thinks about Sauls and how they feel about the available kickers in the marketplace, or for that matter, coming out with this year's draft class. NPR 254 says Styles or Downs for the 5th pick. And it may very well be Styles and Downs staring you in the face at number 5. But to my point, NPR 254, if you get either one of them, you're happy, right? Malachi Fields from Notre Dame, another one of, I think, I happen to be a big Malachi. You guys know me though, right? Come on, you know how much I love skyscraping wide receivers. I'm a big Fields fan. I usually get to watch, 4 or 5 Notre Dame games a year. They're on TV all the time. You get to see them a lot. A lot of times they're in prime time. When I'm on the road with the Giants on Saturday night, I'll put the Notre Dame game on during the late dinner. I'm a big fan of Fields, and you're going to be able to get him later on. Obviously, you don't have to go first or second round there. Does he go in the third round? The Giants don't have a third round pick. Can you get him high in the fourth? Maybe you can. Again, though, let's make sure we understand one thing. While there's going to be a bunch of good, quality, productive receivers available on the second day of the draft, in terms of the premier blue chip elite guys, immediate wide receiver one, all pros, that's not what you're going to get in that second group of receivers. Okay? Just looking at my notes from the receivers at the top of the first round. Obviously, you got Tate. You got Jordan Tyson. People are talking about. They're talking about Lemon, obviously, is another guy who's getting an awful lot of ink. Some people think that Lemon may be the best receiver in this draft. I know some people actually think Tyson might be the number one guy. I'm a Tate guy as the number one receiver in this draft, but I get it. And then that next group, Brazel, Boston. I mean, I don't. Concepcion, do you want to? Here's the thing, too. There are slot receivers and there are boundary receivers. Now, depending upon what happens in free agency, that's also going to tilt. That's where need is going to tilt who you pick. Within the position group, if you've got a boundary receiver, and there's a bunch of those quality boundary receivers in this draft, there's a bunch of slot receivers, quality in this draft. There are a few of them who are also capable of transitioning and being both a boundary or a slot. That's how good a crop this is. Maybe not all pro superstar guys. I mean, look, everybody has said to me, all right, even the scuttlebutt at the combine, even although I think most people are thinking Tate is the number one receiver, he's a wide receiver too. He's not a wide receiver one. He's like a T. Higgins for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's a wide receiver too, a great wide receiver too, but that's what he is. So that's what you have to think about. If the disparity and the drop-off isn't that great with that next handful and cluster of receivers, do you wait to take a receiver to maybe 37? I could see it. All right. Freedom 34-1 NYG. Good evening, Paul. Do you think they could find a guy in late rounds for a tackle like last year? Any suggestions? Go Giants. It doesn't sound that way, Freedom. Again, the scuttlebutt in Indy is that if you don't get a tackle very early, there's really not much. You're going to have to go really early. However, guard's another story. I'm told you will be able to get some guards in the mid-rounds that will have an opportunity to compete. And Armand does throw up what I told you earlier. The Giants do not have a third-round pick this year. They traded that pick last season in the deal to acquire the pick they used for Jackson Dart. And that deal was made with the Houston Texans. Iman Perry says, I trust Coach Harbaugh. Two Giant Goofballs says, trade down and get Peter Woods, defensive tackle. There seems to be a debate as to whether or not he'd be better as a 3 technique or as potentially building himself up a little bit, adding some bulk, and being more of a nose. I have heard people talk about that. I like Peter Woods. Okay, I mentioned him a couple of months ago, I believe, on this show or maybe Big Blue Kickoff Live. I like Peter Woods, but there's some split on him because of some inconsistencies in his play and not knowing exactly how he's going to be used in the pros. Because he does seem to be one of those tweener defensive tackles. You could You could either force him to go one way or another. Okay, Armand Dudas is going to miss Love at Notre Dame, but he probably won't be the best player available that would make the most sense for us at 5. I agree with you, Armand. I do. I would not take Love at 5, although I understand why somebody might. Yes, Isaac Morris says, I heard the Giants interviewed Styles. Of course they did. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? Anybody coming out of that Ohio State program these days, you'd want to interview. Hemon Perry says, yes, Styles is a big linebacker. That's for sure. All right, let's see. Couple more down here. Let me try to get down here because I want to finish wrapping up now. RJR1, I want Reese or Downs. I don't think Reese gets you to 5. I don't see it. Downs has a better chance to get to 5, in my opinion. I don't think Reese will. He also says Tate or Styles or Lemon of those guys, if those guys are not available. I think all 3 of those would be available. Now, see, you've got Lemon, right up there with Tate as an either or. I like Tate number 1 on my wide receiver board. I think, I don't like to use board because I don't put a board together, but I do think in my mind, Tate is the best receiver in this draft. I'm not as high on Lemon. When I watch Lemon's cut-ups, let's see what I wrote down for him. First of all, 65% usage in the slot this past season. Now, and he also does returns. Now, if Wan'Dale Robinson is gone, maybe that's more attractive to you than Tate. So I could understand that. I wrote down I liked his contested catch ability, his separation, and his quicks. I was a little bit questionable on his frame. Remember, he's only 5'11 and 195 pounds. His strength, which could be a problem against physical, stronger defensive backs. And he wasn't particularly terrific with the yak yardage. So that's why I don't have him on the same plane as Cornell Tate. Okay, Mikey 6894, one of our regulars. P. Dot, Sonny Styles gonna Shinego G-Men. Sean Jackson, another one of our regulars, 3203. I'm going to try to get through the rest of these chats. Good evening, Paul. So you're saying it's a win-win for the Giants if Downs, Styles, and Tate are all available at 5. Yes, that's what I'm saying. You've been listening. Am I talking loud enough? Which of those 3 would likely improve the Giants the most? Well, that's a John Harbaugh question, because your head coach and your coordinator, whether it's offense or defense, is going to have to tell your general manager, if you draft this guy, this is how I plan to use him. This is how often he's going to be on the field, how often he's going to come off the field, what packages I would use for him, and how I can maximize what the scouts say are his strengths. Those are the questions that have to be answered. I, unfortunately, do not have a direct pipeline to either Matt Nagy, or to Denard Wilson right now. When those guys got hired by the Giants, they wound up immediately doing their meetings and they went out to the combine. So I haven't, and to my knowledge, none of the media in New York has had an opportunity to talk to the Giants coaching staff. But those are critical questions that have to be answered before anybody can get to your question. I suspect, Downs will hardly ever come off the field. Styles will hardly come ever off the field. And Tate would hardly ever come off the field. I think that we could probably say pretty safely. Now, based on how does your offensive coordinator want to feature guys in his offense, Is he more concerned with throwing the ball to boundary receivers? Or is he a coordinator? Is Nagy going to be a guy who's going to want to do a lot more running? Well, we know where he comes from, and we know where Harbaugh comes from. And that's the interesting part about this. Harbaugh is a guy who absolutely wants to pound the rock. Nagy's a guy who comes from that Kansas City Chiefs system. And while they do want to run it and keep some balance, that's a team that likes to wing it around and run gadget plays. So how does Tate fit the Giants' prospective or probable playbook? That's going to have a great deal in determining what his production is going to be. I think based on what we think we know about Harbaugh and about Denard Wilson, the defensive coordinator, I suspect Downs. That's my gut feeling. Between those three guys, I suspect Downs might be the guy who gives the Giants the most out of those three. That's kind of where I'm lying right now. But I'll reserve the right to change my mind if you give once we get an opportunity to talk to the coaches at some point. Armand Duda mentions Downs' dad was a Giant too. Yeah, Gary Downs was a Giants running back. For those of you who were a lot younger, you will not remember. He was a third-round pick. I want to say back in 1994, because that was Dan Reeves' second season with the Giants. Reeves came here in 93, made the playoffs. And then in 1994, Gary Downs was drafted as a third-round draft choice, as I recall. And he was a talented player, but never really got the chance, behind Rodney Hampton to blossom. All right, let's see if we can knock off the last part of this. MPR 254, I missed this one before. If we draft Tate, I expect we will pay him wide receiver 1 money and Neighbors will leave? No. I don't sense that at all. That comment comes out of left field, and I don't see any substance behind that comment whatsoever. All right, finally, let's see if we can get down to these last few items before we say goodbye tonight. Mikey C, Sunny shines on the run. Yeah, I told you I'd be happy if I were the Giants with any of those 3 Ohio State players. Any of the 4. If you want to include all 4 of them, fine. Any one of them comes to the Giants at 5. How could you not be happy? So please, let's not pick apart any one of those guys and say, oh, I wish they didn't get him. No, let's not do that. They get any one of the Buckeyes. It's a good pick. All right. Let's see here. MPR 254. Could we draft Bain and then trade Kayvon Thibodeaux? Ruben Bain Jr. out of Miami is a guy who really has created a lot of debate at the combine because he's going to measure with short arms. There are people who immediately are going to downgrade him because of his arm length. Then there are others who think he absolutely should be a top 10 pick in this draft because he's got terrific power. He's incredibly agile. He's got very, very good balance, and he really gets after it. He wins a ton of his one-on-ones. Now, that was at the college level. You're going to project it to the NFL level. Does the arm factor become a bigger issue than not? Some people will tell you yes. Other people will say no. So there's a debate there, and it's a legitimate debate. I even had somebody say to me, they think Bain, and let me give you his listing here, 6'2.5", 270 pounds. I had somebody say to me, you know what? I don't really like him with the short arms as an edge rusher in the NFL. I'd make him a 3 technique and move him into a 3 technique defensive tackle who's going to try to penetrate and rush the passer from the defensive tackle spot on the interior. I had somebody tell me that. And you know what? Maybe that's not a bad idea. If the short arms become a problem outside, to have the versatility to try to move them in and see if that can be a way to save the value of the draft pick. If the arm thing becomes an issue, maybe that's a safety valve to make him a better choice higher in the draft. I don't think I would take him myself because I think when you're as high as the Giants are at 5, you got to get as much of a sure thing as you can possibly get. I don't think I want to take a player who has legitimate debates about one of his key skill sets. The fact that there are legitimate people who are doubting him because of his arm length, that means there is some gray area. There is potential for questions, potential for failure. I can't draft a guy at 5 when there are people legitimately saying, we think there is something missing there. I think you've got to go for somebody who checks as many boxes as possible. And if there's one box that has a big question mark in it, to me, he's got to be lower. He can't be a top 5. So I would say no to Bain, NPR 254. Iman Perry says Kayvon Thibodeaux had his best season under Wink, who came from Baltimore. Now we have Harbaugh. He says, I think Kayvon will play better under Wilson and Harbaugh. I happen to believe that as well, Iman. Harlem X says, hey, everybody, he just got in a little late. He says, I just know I missed the entire show. You know, you didn't miss the entire show. I'm going to take it a few more minutes here. He says, just throwing this out there. Caleb Downs, yet another hill I'm dying on. Harlem X, I'm sorry you missed part of the program where I basically said that's where I'm leaning right now, too. Harlem X says, Harbaugh said he talked to Rex Ryan for the D.C. job. Yes, that was also something that Harbaugh has mentioned, but he did not wind up going there. He says, somebody is listening to old man Harlem X. Told you I'm not crazy. No, you're not crazy, Harlem X, not at all. In fact, I enjoy our conversations, and I hope that next week you are able to call in again. And finally, as we finish up here in the last few minutes, Aiden Fink says the Giants haven't considered re-signing Evan Neal as a fullback, though. No, I don't think so. Let's see. JDJ says trade down to get more draft capital, still walk away with Downs or Styles while addressing wide receiver in round 2. Do you really want to take a chance on doing something like that? That is really, really, really risky. Maybe you trade down one spot. Let's say 3 Ohio State guys. 3 of the Ohio State guys are sitting on the board at 5. Okay? Well, 2. It'll be 2. It's not going to be 3. I don't think it's going to be 3. Right? Because we know that that Reese is going to be gone. I would think that probably maybe it could be. Downs, Tate, and Styles. In theory, all 3 of those Ohio State guys could be there at 5. So if you want to tell me you want to trade down one spot with Cleveland because you know if there's 3 Ohio State guys on the board and you'll take any one of those 3 and you're at 5, we'll do the math. That means you could trade down to 6 with Cleveland or 7 with Washington and still get one of the 3 Ohio State guys if you want to play it that way. I guess I would at least listen to you or listen to what the offers were. Harlem X says, I really want Caleb Downs. If they trade down, it'll make me flip a table, but I'm going to trust the process this year. This is going to be our year to put the puzzle together. 27 will be when we start. Mark B, 8365 says, hit the like and subscribe. That would be great. I would appreciate that. Anybody who wants to do that. Harlem X, he's going out on a limb. Give me Harbaugh's phone number so I can explain to him my plan for switching Evan Neal to fullback. Guarantee you he'll do it. Mark B says, always a good show, Paulie. I appreciate that, Mark. Thank you very much for joining us once again. Aiden Fink says, Paul, you're the GOAT. Great show as always. Thank you very much. Sean Jackson wants to know, am I traveling in the combine? Actually, this year got three planes canceled over the course of 2 days, and I'm doing the show here with you guys tonight. At this point, I'm not going out for the final 2 days of what I would wind up doing. So I'm just going to continue doing my research and my phone calls and my text messages and my video calls from the home base, and continuing to work Big Blue Kickoff Live during the J with John Schmelk. JDJ, yeah, Paul, I'm only willing to trade down to 7 to keep the Styles dream alive. If you draft Downs, I'm ready for that old 3 safety look like we had with Antrell Roll, Kenny Phillips, and Deion Grant. JDJ, that's why I'm not against the 3 safety look, okay? I'm not, because Perry Fewell showed us in the 2011 season that the 3 safety look was capable of winning a Super Bowl. So I'm with you, JDJ. That's why I got a lot of reasons why I'm now gravitating toward Downs. I'm going to do this as thanks for another great show. I appreciate it. Harlem X says he's got to bounce out. Thank you, my man. Appreciate you. And that'll do it for tonight's program. So, folks, once again, I am very, very grateful to all of you who have decided to take some time and enjoy the Big Blue Breakdown Live tonight as we went over practically everything there was to go over. Free agency, the draft, scuttlebutt about possible trades, you name it. We gave you the full salad bar and the full smorgasbord after the first couple of days of the NFL Combine this week. So that'll do it for this edition of the Big Blue Breakdown Live on the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel and media network. We will be back again, folks. I promise you, next week. Now, what I got to figure out is how do we deal with the whole situation with the free agency, the tags, and everything else. I got to figure out what day we're going to be back. But you can always watch, okay? Always watch my Twitter page or my X page at Giants WFAN. As always, I promote the show. And again, depending upon how news warrants, we may have to wind up moving the show again next week. But I'm thinking, like we did this week on Wednesday, I'm thinking we'll be back next Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time with a live version of the program. If news warrants, for whatever reason, just get a look at my Twitter page, and I will make sure to give you guys a heads up that the program had to move because news just simply demanded it. Because you Giants fans, I know you want to talk about stuff. I know you want to get in on the action as soon as you possibly can. And so if news warrants, and that goes for any time during this free agency period and this draft period, if news warrants, we'll always try to make an adjustment with the schedule. Again, that'll do it for tonight's show. I'm Paul Dottino. We appreciate everybody for sticking with us on the Big Blue Breakdown Live. We'll see you next time, everybody.